Today's guest, a longtime morning man, producer, sportscaster, sports anchor, and now a best-selling author, Jim Lang, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today was born in Verdun, France. Yes, indeed. He now calls Newmarket home. Former radio voice for the Toronto Argonauts, a reporter, an anchor for the Fan 590, an anchor at Sports Central, at Sportsnet, an anchor at Sportsnet Connected, host of the Jim Lang Morning Show on 105.9 The Region, author of numerous books. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Jim Lang. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim. First of all, I want to talk about Verdun, France. You were born in France. Tell us about that.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Yes, my father, my late great father, God rest his soul, was in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And in the 1960s, the Canadian military was quadruple the size it is now. And this was the height of the Cold War. And the Canadian military had a massive Air Force base, two actually, in Europe. One was in Lambertot, Belgium, right on the border of France and Belgium, and another one in Germany. And my father was what they call a fitter, an aircraft engine mechanic, and worked on a lot of his specialty was multi-engine transport planes and a different aircraft that would fly supplies throughout Europe and from Europe to England and getting supplies back from Canada on the C-130 Hercules to Europe. And so I was born there. We lived in a little town in Belgium. The base actually was in Marville, France. And what people don't realize is at that time in the 1960s, there was such a concern that within NATO, and Canada was a big part of, it still is a big part of NATO, that the Warsaw Pact, the Red Army, would pour through West Germany, through Belgium and France, all the way to the English Channel. And that was a real concern. So as a matter of fact, when my dad was transferred back to CFB Trenton, Joe, you're not going to believe this. He bought a 1967 Plymouth Valiant with a slant six, great car. And he bought it on a U.S. Air Force base, Ramstein Air Force Base. They had 80,000 people on the base. They had a Chrysler dealership and a Chevy dealership on the base. It was so big.
So was that the push button automatic? I can't remember. Was that the
no? It was on the tree.
On the tree.
The engine was indestructible. The engine.
Oh yeah, I'll drive that thing forever and ever. I used to have a Plymouth Fury back in the day. Yeah. So that's crazy. 80,000 people, car dealerships. That's pretty wild. I mean, it's a community within a community. So when did you end up moving to Canada and the culture change there?
Well, I had a number of culture changes. I moved in 67. I was 2.5, and we lived in Trenton. And then after grade 7, we moved to Burbank, California. And that was my big exposure. The Canadian military had bought a plane called the CP-140 Aurora, which was at the time a state-of-the-art long-range patrol plane. And the engines, my dad at that time had become a specialist in the turboprop engines on the C-130 Hercules. They had the same engines on this plane, the Aurora. And so my dad and this another gentleman, Mr. Bamford, were transferred from their respective bases, and along with all these 200 Canadian families in total. And we spent just over a year and a half in Burbank, California at the Lockheed plant while the plane was being built to Canadian specs. And then we all transferred to Greenwood, Nova Scotia, the Annapolis Valley. Now, in Trenton at the time, when the mid-late 70s, we got one hockey game a week, and it was hockey night, and we either got a Montreal Canadiens game with Danny Gallivan, or we got a Maple Leafs game. And then we moved to California, and it was KTLA, it was Vin Scully and the Dodgers, as you all know. Chick Hearn, I believe, did the Lakers, and we got the odd LA Kings game, and that was the first time I saw an NHL game. Is Lockheed? None of the people in the Lockheed plant, they all wanted to see the Dodgers or the Lakers, and they were offering up tickets to the LA Kings, and like, we'll go. So I remember seeing the Triple Crown line and the LA Kings play the Atlanta Flames. And it was the first time I saw an NHL game, and it was just like, I can't believe how good they are. Like it was to see it live was a culture shock, and I was exposed to so many sports and so much sports media and media, Joe. And then we get transferred to Greenwood, Nova Scotia, and we were back to one hockey game a week. And the only time you got more than one game a week is during the playoffs. And it wasn't until we got transferred again for the start of grade 12, and we were in Camp Borden, and that's where I first got to know uh, CFTO Sports, Global Sports Line, Toronto Media. I remember vividly Sunil Joshi, who I work with, doing the sidelines for the Argos and CFRB at the time in the early '80s when we got transferred. So, it's funny for a lot of people assume because I'm in sports that I know chapter and verse of a lot of players from certain areas, and I have to tell them like at certain times in my life, we hardly had a chance to watch certain things. It wasn't available in some of the bases we lived at.
Right. The days of the purple and gold uniforms. I believe Sandy
Yeah,
Hawley was
yeah.
often running the penalty box back at the old LA Forum. Yeah, yeah. Pretty cool. So, okay, but you end up in Toronto and you end up in the sporting community. And how does that come about?
I went to Humber College for radio, and then when I graduated in '87, Joe, that there was no sports radio and really not much sports television. TSN had just started, and I was so green and so raw out of college. There was no chance I was getting anywhere near TSN. So I started working my way through the business, and I was always interested in sports, and I would let my superiors wherever I worked at know that I was interested in sports. And then I was working at a radio station in Montreal, Chaume FM, and they got a chance to come to work at the Fan in February of '95, in which I did. And I was telling the story. They had the Maple Leaf alumni luncheon on Tuesday, and I was there, and I was with Scott Morrison, and Bruce Dobigan was there. And I was telling the story that I can remember vividly. And Mike Murphy was there when Mike Murphy was coach and going down to Leafs practice. And you would see Scott Morrison and Bruce Dobigan and, the veteran reporters and the scrum etiquette, Joe, you would know this, that you didn't ask a question until the pecking order until they asked a question. It
Right.
really taught you to listen, to be an active listener. And then when you knew that, okay, they've asked their question, and then you would say, hey, Coach Murphy, whoever, Coach Burns, you would be able to ask your question and get your soundbite. And that taught me so much back then in that '95, '96 era as I really got into sports media, the professionalism and journalism it takes to make it in this business. And I was very fortunate in about the '96, '97 era, someone that you're near and dear with to work with Pat Marsden. And I learned so much from
Mm.
working with Pat Marsden, and I owe him a lot. And he would teach us stuff without realizing it, just with his storytelling and his anecdotes and relaying some of his different experiences. And it and then it was like, okay, Pat would talk. I always thought you're young, Joe. You're like, oh, I'm ready to go. And then Pat would start talking about stuff like, I'm not ready. I still need to learn this, this, and this before I can even go to the next step. Because, and I find even to this day, I'll work with different people, and I go, well, I think I've done some stuff, and then you see them work, Joe, and you're like, oh, I still need to learn how to do that and that, and so you never really stop learning that.
Yeah, I learned from Pat. I mean, he was a legend, and he hired me back in the day at CFTO. So, yeah, Pat and I go back. We went back a long way, and I mean, that was such a great morning sports show that they had. Him and Derringer. Would you say that was maybe the best sports show you ever worked on?
Yeah, it was, um, and the amount of talent that came out of there. Mike Richards, who's gone on to bigger and better
Mm.
things. Craig Venn, who's the morning man at a rock station in Oshawa. Myself, we all worked there. And at the time at the station, there was a Greg Sansoni, who's an executive, and Todd Macklin. They're executives at Rogers Sports Media. Elliot Friedman, Barry Davis. I mean, it was unbelievable how much talent came out of there. And Brian Spear, a fantastic producer who's been producing the Hockey Night in Canada intermission for I think 20 years now. They all came out of that sort of system, and and that's where I learned how to start learning the craft of being a reporter, putting stories together. Um, Pat, Pat was kind of funny this way. You know this, Joe. he would come across like, oh, I don't do homework, I don't do this, I just come and do it. But he would quietly come in early and would handwrite all his notes with beautiful penmanship with this gold cross pen. And he was a lot more prepared and a lot more ready when the mics went on than he ever allowed on. He really worked at it, and it's something. It's a lesson that I kind of taken with me to this day, almost 30 years later.
Yeah, he did a lot of research always, he read several newspapers every day, and he was pretty well prepared, and a lot of people wouldn't have guessed that.
No,
Didn't read a lot of soccer, though. Didn't read about a lot of soccer.
no,
So.
no, no. He had no. The Pat. Anyone knows Pat Marsden? He had his favorite sports and people. The
Yeah,
other stuff, he had no time for. Like someone else
right.
could cover that. Pat wasn't going to cover that.
Yeah, so okay, so how do you end up at Sportsnet?
Well, I was I ended up working at a radio station. Well, it's 640, a Toronto 640, but it was called Talk 640. It was 640 AM, and it's the AM sister station to Q107 in Toronto. And I was the sports director doing morning. I did a split shift, morning and afternoon sports, and afternoons with Marsha Lederman. And then I started doing morning sports at Q107. And what happened was, unbeknownst to me in 2001, Sportsnet and Scott Moore, who was it was CTV Sportsnet at the time, remember? Um, they
Mhm,
did a deal with Chorus Radio, and I was at the time Chorus Radio with 640 and Q. They wanted to create their own sort of sports radio syndicated network. And Chorus thought, great, we'll save money. We won't need to hire someone to do morning sports. We'll have this thing called Sportsnet Radio. And we provided the morning, midday, and afternoon sports updates at all these stations all around the province. And I was pegged to head it up and hire some people. And so I did the morning sports run and then managed all the other people. And then what happened was uh, Damian Goddard, who was doing the morning show, was going on a 3-week family vacation. And at the time, the morning show was live. So you had to be on your call time was 4 a.m. You had to be there for 4 a.m.
mhm,
And then
mhm,
we were on
mhm,
the air live at 6. And the evening anchors, Joe, they filled in for him once in a while and they told management, like, I'm not doing it. Physically, they couldn't do it because
mhm,
they had been so used to coming in at 5 and 6 o'clock and working to 2 and 3 in the morning. It was like their body rejected the shift. They couldn't do
mhm.
it. And I had done a little bit of sports TV for CHTV, for Phil Williams, for football and hockey. And then so they had me do a little screen test. And they go, well, he kind of looks like he knows what he's doing. And then so I ended up filling in for the 3 weeks. And then I became the backfill. So I would get someone to fill in for me when I came off Sportsnet Radio if they needed me to fill in on Sportsnet TV, the AM show when someone was off.
I used to do that once in a while. One time for a 2-week stint, I'd get off my shift at CFTO and leave the station about 12:45, quarter to one, 1 o'clock, somewhere around there, and then get up and turn around, go sleep at a nearby hotel and do Canada AM. And I did
Oh,
that.
oh,
And that's getting up at 3:30 to be at the station by 4. So
yeah.
that was crazy. Didn't do that a lot, but it did it once in a while. It was pretty crazy times back then. So we actually have a little bit of video. You a bit with Casey Hollins called the Digital Dose. Okay. Oh, and one of the
Okay.
segments, this is going back a ways, she asked you about the offseason moves by the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's roll that clip, Vic.
Which team made the most improvements this offseason? Draft, trades, whatever it may be.
The Kansas City Chiefs made serious improvements, getting Alex Smith in a good position, a good offense with Andy Reid. That's going to help them quite a bit. And Cincinnati, the Bengals, not a lot is being talked about that. They retained and locked up all their key players, especially little-known guys like Geno Atkins and defense are all locked up. They had a pretty good draft. They got Tyler Eifert from Notre Dame, that tight end. So they're going to be a good team this year.
So there you go. This is a little bit before the Patrick Mahomes era. You're talking about Alex
Yes.
Smith, but Andy Reid is
Yeah.
there. And it was kind of a precursor of things to come. Did you ever think this would happen, right?
I mean, I knew with Andy Reid there, they would be good because I remember covering Eagles training camp when Andy Reid was the coach of the Eagles, and they had brought Mike Vick in, and Andy Reid is a very experienced, capable coach He's part of the Mike Holmgren coaching tree from Green Bay. But when they got Patrick Mahomes, I thought this will be interesting. I had no idea it would be this good, Joe. And they become a dynasty, a Patriots-like dynasty in the National
Yeah.
Football League. And people kind of forget they have lost a lot of key players over the last few years. And Andy Reid and his management and his scouts and coaching staff have been able to fill all the voids, and they just keep winning. It's an incredible story that doesn't get talked about enough because it's all about Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, and you forget all the
Right.
little pieces they keep adding to the team every year. They're turning over 15-20% of that roster, and making it compliant with the salary cap in the NFL, which is a real challenge for any league with a salary cap to do that. And the Chiefs have done just a remarkable job. They are, I mean, until someone knocks them off, they're still the team to beat, Joe.
Oh, they are. And you know what? Andy Reid is such a much nicer fellow than Bill Belichick. So
Yeah.
this dynasty, in my opinion, is much more fun.
Although I will say this. I mean, someone had asked me this before, and I knew he would be good. Bill Belichick, breaking down games, analyzing games, just talking football. You can see he enjoys it so much. And people ask me, where will he end up as a coach? He will only go back to coaching if it's the perfect scenario for him. Because right now he's on the Manning cast on Mondays. He's doing the Pat McAfee show. He's doing Inside the NFL on NFL Films. Uh, and his stock just keeps going up and up every week. And his asking price, he doesn't even have to negotiate. When these franchises, these owners are looking at their struggling teams and they're turning on their internet, their phone, their TV, and there's Bill Belichick giving the answers to their questions week after week. He's going to be able to just set it up however he likes and the scenario he wants with all the power that he wants, Joe, that he could ever ask for. He'll say, like, I want this, this, and this. And if you don't give it to me, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, the guys can't argue with the success, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. Although Brady had a little bit to do with it. Okay, I'm going to ask you about just a little bit, yeah. So I'm going to ask you about 105.9, the region. How did you
Yes.
end up there, and what? Tell us about that gig.
The owners, Deborah McLaughlin and Pip Bola, they're great people, and they saw a need. York Region, which is over 1.2 million people north of Steeles Avenue, north of Toronto, all the way to Lake Simcoe, is bigger than Edmonton or Calgary and Ottawa, and is not serviced by radio. And we try to focus on what goes on in York Region, news, traffic, local sports, charity events, community events. And quite frankly, a lot of Toronto radio stations, and I'm not speaking of school, their budgets have been squeezed. They're really focused only on a pocket of Toronto. And once you get out to a certain area, they just don't really have the resources or time to give it any time in the year or care about what's going on. So we try to fill that void and let people know what's happening in their own backyard, in their own community. And I know this Friday, we're kind of excited. We're doing an event with a group of individuals. You remember Brent Smith, the Leafs trainer, Joe?
Yep.
Yeah, and he's part of a group with the Unionville Men's Hockey Club called Hockey with Heart. And there's a group of people, Joe Bowen's a part of it. They've been playing men's hockey in the Unionville Markham area for 4 decades, and they do a lot of charity and give back to the community. So Friday, they're basically taking over the Hockey Helps the Homeless event in the Angus Glen Community Center. And we're going to be part of it. I'll be broadcasting live, and we'll be doing reports from the day. I love that kind of stuff, Joe, because it reminds me, what it was like when I first got into the business. And there's so much of a podcast and social media and satellite radio, which is great. And I consume it, everyone consumes it. But we also need to make sure that people know what's happening in their own community and how they can make a difference.
Yeah, we've really lost that in this day and age, haven't we? Like, and we got no pulse on the local community at any, the major stations, and used to do a lot more local coverage, and of course now there's zero in terms of sports coverage, and locally it's just really, really suffering.
And Joe, and I'm not just saying because I'm on your show. I remember vividly you and your compatriots at CFDO shining a spotlight on a local amateur boxer a swimmer. You would see these great little vignettes and these stories that you guys would put together about local athletes. And I think you were doing a great service to the community to let people know about it. And I think that's important for broadcasters.
Yeah, well, there's none of that going on today, obviously, and
No,
not from the major stations anyway. So I mean,
yeah.
you know, I don't know. You think we'll ever? Do you think that piece will ever come back? I don't know.
I it's going to come back for independent radio stations like ours, through like what you do, Joe. That's how it's going to be created. Like the content's going to be created by other means, and then people hopefully, find out about it. I guess the days and sitting around the TV at 6 o'clock watching the news seems to be past, but maybe through their Facebook page or through the internet or through social media, they get these short stories in these clips and these little highlights about local athletes, local people. And that's one of the reasons I like doing Everyday Hockey Heroes is we find these people across Canada who do great things that no one knows about. And I love being able to tell their story and put their story together because I don't care what the sport is in Canada. There are legions of people, men and women, that no one knows about that make it possible. Tennis, swimming, boxing, basketball, hockey, you name the sport. There are all these great people that make it possible for young people to play it. And it's nice to tell their story.
Right, they're dedicating their time. They're not necessarily getting paid for it, and they're doing a heck of a job. But yes, this is the book. I just finished reading it. It's a fantastic read. Everyday Hockey Heroes, Volume 3. Quite a wide variety of subjects. And what exactly were you looking for when you put this together, Jim? I know you
It
mentioned that
worked.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, working with the publishers, we wanted to touch on a few different themes and a few different people making a difference for people with physical disabilities. One of my favorite chapters is a gentleman, Kelly Serbu, who's the captain of the Canadian blind hockey team, who lost his vision, became legally blind at 19, and then uh, still played competitive hockey, uh, got a law degree, and is a judge. He's a judge, one of the Superior Court judges in Halifax in Nova Scotia. And he's a great hockey player. And if you've never seen competitive blind hockey, you're missing out. And when you see it, they had a great event at the Mattamy Center last March, and I believe they're going to be back in March as well. And they have some of the top blind hockey players from the country. And some of them are 19, 20, 21-year olds who are playing high level junior hockey, Joe, who had a disease or an illness and lost their vision, became legally blind. And you could tell that the way they skate and they move on the ice, that they are very talented. And I think hockey as a sport, it's important to make sure they always use that term, Joe. Hockey is for everyone. Let's make it for everyone. For people who are visually impaired, let's make it for people who are of different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. Let's make it open for everyone, men, women, you name it. And let's make sure they're empowered and have the resources to do it. And that's the one thing, well, you know her very well, Angela James. She was the first true superstar of Canadian hockey in this country. And, she talked about it, talking to me, like, we just want the women to have the same resources and the same, access to everything they need that the men's team do. I don't think if you're playing for the national team, whether you're a man or woman, you should have the same resources. You should have the same food and trainers and facilities that the men do. That, to me, that as a country, that just makes sense no matter what international sport you're playing.
It's you mentioned that Angela, like we had her on the show, and a lot of people referred to her back in the day as the female Wayne Gretzky. But this we actually we asked her about her hockey and how it helped her cope with her tough circumstances in Flemington Park. Let's roll that clip, Vic.
Just to go grab some groceries, sometimes I would have to fight my way just to go over there because that was just the neighborhood. If I had to go to school, sometimes I would have to have a fist fight just to get to school. So for me, playing hockey, within, certain parameters of the game allowed me, freedom to do what I love to do And sometimes, if you were called a nigger, or if you were called, a girl and you shouldn't be playing here, those things didn't hurt me, but I know that I would turn around and give a two-hander across the back of the leg or something like that, because that's just how we did it back then.
And I love the story that she relayed in that book.
Well, she is such a special person and so humble, Joe. And you had the clip, and she said the same thing. And it kind of gives you sort of the hairs in the back of your neck, thinking you have to fight to get to school. That's the kind of neighborhood she grew up in, with very, very little resources, and working, 2 and 3 jobs to pay for things, and getting rides to the rink from friends and family, and and she's such a worthy recipient of the Hockey Hall of Fame. The Hockey Hall of Fame was meant for someone like Angela James. Yes, because of her accomplishments on the ice, but it's almost like a builder too, Joe. What she meant for women's hockey in the country, and we see it as it is now with the Challenge Cup and the Four Nations Cup and the World Championships. None of that would have been possible without her, and what she had to endure in the early years and everything. And yeah, no, just a special individual who cares passionately about the game and making sure that women in this country enjoy it as well. And I think now when we see the Olympics, I don't know about you, Joe, but when the women's team are playing in a huge match, it's as important to me and is as big deal to my friends and families it is the men's team. And I remember the game a few years ago when there was an empty, remember the empty net hit the post, and like it's those sports bars are filled with people now watching the women's team in these huge games, and I think that's wonderful. That's the way it should be.
Right, and the PWHL, right? That's it's really taken off, and it's really great to see it. That league's only just going to explode, really, for sure. It already has. Okay, Mark Borowiecki, defenseman for the Senators and the Predators, pretty good scrapper when it was called upon to do so. uh, Opened up about his challenges with mental health.
Yeah, he was so open and honest, and he said at one point he was getting up at 3 a.m. and working out, and then his young wife said, "Mark, I'm worried about you." And he got help, and he was diagnosed as OCD and got the help he needed. And he's healthy and happy, and has a beautiful young family. And and as you say, he was no sweetheart, as Don Cherry liked to say. He was a tough guy, and he was there to play a tough game of defense. But it's no different than if you crack a rib or you pull a hamstring. Sometimes you need help. You need a doctor. And
you got the dog's
yeah.
He's got his 2 cents worth of it, right?
And Mark
it's all good.
Mark, he's just one of those individuals that it's hard not to cheer for. In his love of the game, and he's like, "Hey, I needed help. Please get help if you need help." And we have a mutual friend, Ian Leggett. And Ian Leggett did a golf tournament a number of years ago called Stop the Stigma. And there is an alarming stat. I didn't know this till I was there with them, about men over 40 in Canada and the rate of suicide. And it's really, really bad. It's really bad because men don't get help. They don't ask for help. And then it gets too out of control. And then there's a problem. And I think hopefully people read Mark's story, especially guys like my age, and go, "Hey, maybe I do need to talk to someone. And if he could do it, why can't I do it?"
Yeah, this old idea, Michael Landsberg's sick, not weak, and
yes,
it's a strength when we're able to actually reach out and ask for help to get through whatever we need to get through at the particular time. And this whole idea that suck it up, do it on your own, figure it out on your own. Like, I mean, no, that's not how it works. Help is available. Use it, because that's what's going to get you through, right? Dean Barnes played minor hockey in the Burlington area. Played at University of Waterloo. has an amazing collection of hockey cards featuring Black players, interestingly. And here's a clip from Dean at his display at the Memorial Cup not long ago.
There's lots of different stories that I've really appreciated, and the players have really appreciated giving back, and they at all levels recognize that they're role models themselves, and they're stepping up and wanting people to know that there is diversity in the game, and you know, some of them have overcome racism over the time period, and they really just want no one else to feel that experience. They really want the game to be open and open access for everyone.
What did you find most compelling about Dean's story?
He went to a hockey camp with Tony McKegney when he was a kid. He was a teenager. And as a young Black man and growing up in, Southern Ontario, Tony McKegney was everything. And for people who don't realize, Tony McKegney was a really good player and a good goal scorer.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone of color playing the sport of hockey in Canada at that time, Tony McKegney was a real role model. And now we almost take it for granted. There's almost every team in the league has a player of color, some sort of race, that different race. It's not even, no one even thinks about it anymore, Joe. But it wasn't that way back in the early mid '80s. It wasn't that way at all. And so the one thing that Dean has done is with his traveling show that he does all these different tournaments and events, with all these different cards of all these Black players over the years. For kids, young kids growing up thinking it's hockey for me, they see that, oh, wait a sec, look at all these guys who played in the NHL. Hockey is for me. They got their own hockey card. That could be me someday. And hockey is a sport, the more it's open to more people of more backgrounds, the better. It's getting so expensive, and it's such a challenge for families just to outfit kids with equipment and then forget the registration and all the travel and stuff. So anything that can be done to keep that spark alive for hockey, it is a good thing. And Dean's definitely doing that with it's a real passion play. He's got a PhD in education. He's a brilliant man. He's been involved with the Halton School Board for years. He's an experienced and award-winning educator, but his passion is hockey and sharing his love of Black players in the NHL and the history of it through hockey cards.
You talked about the challenges with getting equipment out there, and nobody's done a better job of that than Graham McWatters, right? I mean, he didn't play at a high level, but it certainly made his mark in many other ways. Tell us about his Indigenous hockey equipment drive.
Graham, it was so natural how it started. He just happened to be in Barrie at a tournament with his kid, and saw this Indigenous gentleman trying to put together pieces of broken equipment to get his kid ready to play. And it sort of tore his heart open. I said, this is not right. What's going on? So it started small, and they started with sort of like a delivery truck, like an Amazon type truck you would see, Joe, with some equipment. Now they're at the point they need tractor trailers and those great big containers you see in the container trains filled with equipment that's going to Indigenous reserves, not just in Ontario, but to Inuit reserves in the Northwest Territories. And they're finding that Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, their charitable wing, is donating sticks, and Canadian Tire. So a lot of different leagues, different companies have stepped up for transportation, and they have delivered thousands of skates and sticks and equipment bags to kids in these remote Indigenous communities all across the country. And we take it for granted. We drive around, we see Sport Check, we see Canadian Tire. I mean, if you're living in a remote Indigenous community in the middle of nowhere in northern Manitoba or northern Ontario, where are you even going to get equipment, let alone afford it? And they're bringing the equipment to these kids. And I'm a big believer that young people, if they're active and they're playing a sport, it's healthy for them physically and mentally, and keeps them out of trouble. It's a good thing. I think it's a great thing that they're doing.
Yeah, 4,500 kilometer trip for the equipment. That's incredible. Yeah, and the great Reggie Leach said that the work that Graham's doing is literally saving lives. I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, we always hear these stories about, whether a kid in suburban Toronto or in a remote community in northern Manitoba, that if if you know, especially we saw this in the pandemic, get them out of the house, get them away from the computer, get them into a boxing ring or a skating rink or a soccer field or anything for a little bit. It breaks up your day. It's good for you. And I'm a believer. It makes you happier. And I think it makes any kid happier, no matter what your background or where you're from. So Reggie is right. I think it's saving lives.
Yeah, I know you talk about some of the billeting people, people that billet players and what they do, and then Jason Payne. Well, what a story of perseverance he was. A guy who was
Yeah.
always believed he could do it, and eventually he did. Right? Yeah,
Yeah. And,
pretty good
and
scrapper, obviously.
good scrapper, and a real rough and tumble ride through junior hockey and minor pro hockey, and now coach and director of hockey operations for the Cincinnati Cyclones of the ECHL, and trying to climb the ladder to be a coach. And I'm old enough to remember when there was the first couple of black coaches in the NFL, what a big deal it was. And now no one even thinks about it. And eventually in the National Hockey League, we will have a black head coach or an Asian Canadian head coach. And that'll be just, they're the coach, and it'll be good for hockey and good for the NHL when that happens. And, whether or not Jason gets to that point where he's a coach in the NHL, I don't know. But the more people like Jason in the system, the better it is for hockey, better it is for the NHL, and a real positive individual. And I think for the young men who play for him, because he can speak to them, Joe. I mean, he's been caught and released and sent down, and he's played at all levels of minor pro hockey. So if anyone can speak to them about the grind that they're going through, it's him. Like he really, he's lived the life, and I think that's important at that level. Can you imagine if you're a guy that played 10 years in the NHL, you're coaching the ECHL? I know what you're going through, and they're like, no, you don't, but he does.
Right. And I mean, the pains of getting there. I mean, this guy is so resilient, so persistent, and you believing in yourself and you having a dream, hanging on to it, and do whatever you can to get there. And he's done that for sure. Interesting
Yeah,
story here. Also, you'll go ahead, finish that thought. Yeah.
no, real quick. I saw Duncan Keith the other day, and people forget that after he got drafted, he spent 2 full years in the AHL before he saw the NHL. Not all
Mhm.
players drafted go right to the NHL, Joe. You know this. So sometimes you got to pay dues, and Jason's doing that. So continue.
Well, Leonard Lai, I believe, is that correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
An engineer who never played hockey but made gloves that make it possible for some kids with cerebral palsy to hold this hockey stick and play hockey. And how did you hear about Leonard?
Through the CBC and a local CBC reporter in St. John's, Newfoundland, I heard the story of a kid, and it was weird because he has a partial cerebral palsy disability. So his left hand, he could put his fingers in the glove, no problem. His right hand, the way the fingers formed, he
Mhm.
couldn't put them in the individual fingers of the glove. And someone had reached out to Leonard and his organization saying, could someone retrofit a hockey glove for this young man to play? Now, he's a pickleball player, doesn't skate, doesn't play hockey, but he's an engineer. So they send him the glove, and what is it? He engineered. Sorry, Joe. I hope I didn't freeze there on you.
No,
He
you just broke up with it. Yeah,
he
finish. Yeah.
oh sorry. He reversed engineered the glove and put it back together as a mitten. So his right hand, the
Right.
kid could cup his hand into the glove with protection and meet all the safety standards in play. And now there's families from different parts of the country who are FedExing gloves because they have a child with a disability to his home in just outside of St. John's, Newfoundland. And he has a little workshop with a light, and he makes the gloves and sends them back, and they send him thank yous, and he couldn't be happier.
Jim Peck, born in Korea. I remember Jim playing for the Oshawa Generals back in the day. Won a couple of Stanley Cups with the Penguins, of course, and then ended up coaching Korea at the Olympics. What an excellent performance by this guy, and giving back. Really
Oh,
understands about that.
I got it. Joe, one of the favorite people I've ever talked to. His love of hockey is so intense, and and when I was doing the research, you'll appreciate this story. I said to Jim, Jim, in all the Stanley Cup photos after you won the first time, every time Mario Lemieux has the cup, you're in the photo and your hair's kind of, what was going on there? Well, his mom, this is such a great story. His mom would have coffee on Monday mornings with a group of other Korean Canadian moms. And he wanted his mom to see his photo with the Stanley Cup in the Toronto Star. And he knew that wherever Mario Lemieux was, the people were taking photos. So he saw Mario with the cup skating around and he followed him around. It looked like he was doing the Herbings, blue line to red line. And he kept looking back to see where the camera was. And sure enough, there's a photo of Lemieux and there's Jim Pack there. So his mom could see the photo of the Toronto Star the next day with her girlfriends having coffee.
Oh my God. We did that in 1984 when the Oilers won the cup for the first time. I was in there. I was working for Lethbridge TV station back then. And I remember being in the dressing room. I got an all access pass for that game. And I was in the dressing room and I remember seeing Wayne Gretzky being interviewed. We were standing right behind him. We didn't move, of course, on Hockey Night in Canada.
So if
you go and look, you'll see a couple of those in the background.
Yeah, and it makes total sense to me. I'm like, well, yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, he's given his life to hockey, and a great storyteller, and someone who loves the game and is still involved with the game. And I think that experience coaching the South Korean team in Korea at the Olympics, as much as winning the Stanley Cup meant to him, that he would say that meant as equally as much to him. That was quite special, especially basically going home, coaching his home country's hockey team.
Chicks with Sticks, women of all ages playing regularly, some special bonding going on among these women. And that was a fun group, wasn't it?
It is. And I got tipped off to the story and I started talking to them. And they range in age, Joel, from about 45 to about 82. There's a woman named Betty who's 82. They play every week. And the average age is in the late 50s, early 60s. And
right.
I'm 59. I still play, and putting their story together, I'm like, well, why can't I play? I'm going to keep playing as long as I can. And when they're not playing hockey, they're raising money for the community, for breast cancer, for different charities. They support each other. And they're just such a positive, great group of women. And a lot of them were mothers who had a husband who played hockey and sons that played hockey. And when they were done playing hockey, they're like, wait a sec, I've spent my entire adult life at the rink. I want to play hockey. And a lot of them got into hockey late after all their kids were done playing, and then they picked up the sport. And I think that's wonderful too, that you're never too old to start playing hockey. And that's what these women do.
I can see a little bit of skill there for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I can skate that fast. Not now, that's for sure. Yeah. Logan Boulet. I mean, that was a story that I brought tears to my eye. Literally. Logan, of course, great way to cap the book. I thought, he died in that Humboldt Broncos bus crash, but his decision to donate his organs has had such an incredible impact. And tell us a little bit about some of that, including, of course, Green Shirt Day.
It was so heartbreaking to talk to his family about it because, I'm a parent and I can't imagine what they went through and what was out of the tragedy of that bus crash and the people that died and got hurt, Joel, for the Boulet family to be involved with Green Shirt Day and the push to get people to sign up to be organ donors. Over 150,000 people have signed their organ donation card since they started. And it keeps growing and growing. And what I didn't realize, and I just assumed, well, don't most people do that? But there's millions of people in Canada who do either like, oh, I forgot. Oh, it is important because every organ they donate potentially saves a life. And so in his passing and what he did, he donated 6 organs and got the ball rolling on this phenomena that is Green Shirt Day. Even years after he's passed, Logan Boulet is still giving back to Canada through his selflessness with Green Shirt Day and inspiring others to sign their organ donation card and be an organ donor. And Toby and Bernie, his parents, are just incredible people. His sister Mariko, they're so resilient and such special people. And the Humboldt Broncos community, the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League community, is very tight knit. But now, Joe, this is a coast to coast thing where people around the country wearing the green shirts and getting people to sign up for their organ donation card. And it's all because of this young man who decided to sign his organ donation card, and a few months later lost his life in that bus crash. It was one of the most gut-wrenching things for hockey fans all across the world to witness in the news afterwards. I can't imagine being the family, and then I can't imagine basically almost reliving it every Green Shirt Day, because you're talking about Logan and talking about those kids in the bus crash. But they do, and they're doing it for a good reason. And every year they're signing up tens of thousands of more people to be organ donors. And maybe one day it'll be millions across Canada, and that it would be great, Joe.
They talk. The Boulay family talks about finding dimes, and that's a thing for us too. We see our son Spencer when we find dimes. It's definitely a sign for us. I mean, we find them in the most crazy places, and it's. I could really relate to that part of it. So, you are a former play-by-play voice for the Toronto Argos, and what do you think about the Argos' chances? I mean, they've lost Chad Kelly, which is a big blow. Can they get by Winnipeg without Kelly?
I don't think so. If it was Chad Kelly healthy, I love their chances to win. And God bless Nick Arbuckle. But 1 week with the first team offense against Mike O'Shea and that Winnipeg team is an awfully tough thing to ask, Joe. I hope they can make it competitive and make a game of it. But as far as winning, I don't see how they can do it. If Chad Kelly, I mean, such a gruesome leg injury too. If he hadn't got hurt, I would have gone with the Argos to win this game, especially with their defense, and their defense will help. But without them, no, I don't see it.
Okay, what about the Leafs? Your thoughts on the Maple Leafs? I mean, is this the version that can finally reach the promised land?
I get asked this a lot, Joe. If they had Connor Hellebuck like they have in Winnipeg, I'd feel a lot better. And
Stolarz has been pretty good.
He's been pretty good, yeah. But I just find the Leafs are the way they're built. They need a great goalie. And when they had Cujo in his prime, and they had El Belfour, they had Felix Potvin, it's not a mistake that era with those three goalies were the most successful in the postseason, because they had that kind of goaltending that could bail them out when they needed it. And I will be interested to see what Brad Treliving and Craig Berube do at the trade deadline, what they add. I still have a feeling Craig Berube and the players are still getting to know each other, what he wants from them, what they want from him, and how they work together. There's no question the talent's there. I don't think anyone can question that, but it's more than just a talent and throwing your sticks on the ice. And there's so much else that goes into it. And I don't think Florida is a good team, but I don't think the Panthers were the most talented team last year. But with all the pieces in place and the coaching and the goaltending and the depth, that's why they won the Stanley Cup. And maybe it can come together for the Leafs this year, but I still think they might have to add something at the deadline before I push my chips on the table. So I'm cautiously optimistic, especially with the current playoff format. If it was 1 versus 8, then you probably get a better favorable playoff matchup first round. But because they're probably going to play Boston or Tampa or Florida, that's especially Florida. What if they have to play Florida out of the gate or someone like that? That makes it so tough, Joe.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, for them to finish first or second in the division, because Boston right now, Tampa right now, I think those are teams that are beatable, and I think Berube might just be the guy to pull these guys together. And I don't think they're done until that that trade deadline deal that comes along. I think you'll find that there will be some additions. Yeah, I see. So, Jim, before we go, we're partnered with a group called Believe, Become, Be You. It's a mentorship program for kids from 10 to 17. What would be the message you have for kids that might be struggling to find their way in this world today?
Well, I mean, it took me a long time to figure it out. It doesn't happen quickly. So many athletes, so many people in media. It takes time, and you know, you and I both have been lucky to know a lot of different people in this industry, and not everyone's great at 18 or 19. Some of them it takes to their 20s, some of them their 30s before things really click. So never just stop working at what you do. Whatever it is you do, just keep working at it, because every day you work at it, you get a little bit better and you get a little bit more experience, and that work ethic will see you through in the end. And others may drop off, they may go to do something else, but if you just kind of stay focused and keep working at it, and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and before you know it, you look back and go, look how far I've come. I didn't realize that. And that kind of happens in business and in media and athletics and whatever you do in life. It takes time. And I find I'm personally, even at my age, I'm 59, Joe, and I'll work with people older than me, same age, younger, and I'm always learning something. And that's important. You never stop picking up some skills along the way, or stop learning, or you're like, oh, I didn't know how to do that. Okay, that's interesting. And so that's the big thing, is you just keep working at it, keep learning. And if showing up is half the battle. You keep showing up, you keep working, you will get there eventually.
Yeah, you got a Jason Payne it, don't you? You got a Jason
I'm
Payne
sorry?
You got a
Payne.
Jason
Yeah.
Payne it.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's a great example. I mean, kept
Yeah,
at it,
yeah.
kept at it. And yeah, in so many of these people like that, Angela James, I mean, at the beginning, with everything going against her, there's no way on paper that she would be who she is in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but she kept at it. And I find so many people, when you actually get down to the bones of their story, they just didn't give up. They kept working, they kept at it, they kept doing it, got a little bit better, and picked up skills along the way. And it, not to get too philosophical, but this author named Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, and his theory was the 10,000 hour theory, that whatever you do, whether it's the Beatles or whatever mission you have, if you're a carpenter, whatever, at 10,000 hours, you become so good at it, you do it, you're like an expert. You do it without even thinking. It's part of your muscle memory. And that's the one thing that I've learned covering athletes, is they've put so much time in the ring, on the ice, on the court, doing what they do. You ask them, how did you do that? They can't tell you, because their muscle memory is taken over, and it's like instinct to them. It's like you and I pouring water in a glass. You just do it. You don't even think about it. And that's part of it as well, I find.
You become a master. That's my son's theory. He's a master artist, and he's put the time in. Tyler Tilley, look him up. He's pretty incredible. So once again, the book is Everyday Hockey Heroes. You'll laugh, you'll cry. I did. Good luck with the book, Jim, and good luck with the rest of your books. Thank you so much. You can listen to Jim on 105.9 The Region, on 105.9 FM, of course. Instagram at Langer's World. On X, it's Sportsnet Jim. And Jim, thank you for taking this time to be on the show.
It's a pleasure. And Sunil Joshi says hi.
Yeah, say hi to Sunil for sure. He's a great guy, great man. Yeah.
The best. All
right, Jim.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate this. All right, when we come back, Jean-Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal? Who wins?
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
Welcome to the Ultimate Action Star Tournament, a face-off of the toughest movie heroes from the 80s and the 90s. Starting with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal squaring off in their prime. Who would win? Based on movie fighting skills alone, Jean-Claude Van Damme would likely edge out Steven Seagal. Why? Well, Van Damme's roles showcase a mix of speed, flexibility, and high-impact kicks, like in Bloodsport and Kickboxer, giving him a versatile advantage. Seagal's characters, on the other hand, excel at close-quarters combat with powerful, calculated strikes and Aikido throws. While Seagal's techniques would be lethal in close range, Van Damme's agility and kickboxing prowess would allow him to keep his distance and strike with deadly accuracy. Thus, Van Damme wins. Now, this is the final judgment. You can disagree, but you would be wrong.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, and I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home and they painted the walls, they added some color. It's fantastic, and I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional, they were courteous, they were respectful, and they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our latest shows are on there. Shorts, clips, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Doesn't cost you a dime. Thanks once again to Jim Lang for being on the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678.
MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.